A colleague of mine said something to me a few years ago that I've come to realize is probably true. What he said was this. He said, your students are going to have a better experience in their courses, and they're probably going to learn more if they like you and if you like them. Now, clearly, that doesn't mean that if teachers like students or students like teachers, that they're necessarily going to learn something. That's clearly not the case. And it's also clearly not the case that you can't learn something from someone you don't like, or you can't teach someone something that you don't like. But generally speaking, in my experience, and I say this as my experience as a student, I had a better experience with the teachers that I had that I liked than the ones that I didn't like. And bizarrely, there's some teachers out there who don't like students. I've never understood that, why you would take that as a career if you don't like the job you're doing, but nonetheless. So at any rate, I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of kind of how I roll so you can determine right up front whether I'm going to be the kind of person that's just constantly triggering you all semester long. Because if you're having to contend with your dislike of me as I'm trying to get you to understand something, that's just making your life a lot harder than it needs to be. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of things that I think. So one of the things that I really value is intellectual curiosity, intellectual humility. What I mean by that is this, is I am way less certain now at 52 of of what's true. I'm way less certain today about almost everything than I was when I was 20 or 25. When I was that age, I truly believed that I had it all figured out and that I just had to keep gathering information that would continue to confirm what I thought to be the case, and then just get myself moving in this direction of kind of reshaping the world in the way that I thought it should be shaped. And boy, I realize now that was just a stupid way to live, right? For one thing, it's really boring. It's also obnoxious, but it's really boring because you're not opening yourself up to ideas that you might otherwise benefit from considering because you believe you've already identified the worthy ideas. But perhaps even riskier than that is if you don't move forward with intellectual humility and with the understanding that you're probably wrong about what you think to be the case at any given moment, then you'll never figure out what it is that you don't know, right? So I can find myself in this position where I don't know something. And if I know I don't know something, that's all right. I can turn to a person who has that information, or I can Google something. Knowing that I don't know something that's okay. But not knowing that I don't know something, that's ignorance. That's a truly vulnerable position to be in because I won't even be aware of what questions that I need to be asking. And the only way to find out what it is that I don't know is to listen to people who are saying things to me that don't necessarily align with what I already think to be the case or what I already know. So I have to kind of open myself up. It's super, super risky feeling, but I have to open myself up. And I have really valued the benefit of doing that for the last 20 years, maybe 15 years of my life, 20 years. And I really appreciate it when students are way more mature intellectually than I was when I was a student, who are also able to come into to a situation and make themselves vulnerable by being willing to admit this. I've been wrong in the past. When I was wrong, before that moment I realized I was wrong, I thought I was right. And I didn't know I was wrong until it was pointed out to me. So there are things that I believe right now that I think are true that I'm probably going to find out in a week or 2 weeks or 5 years or 20 years that aren't true in the way that I'm thinking right now. And I don't know what those things are. I don't know what it is that I think is true right now that I'm going to think 5 years from now is actually true in a different way, or it's just plain false. So the only way I can figure that out and kind of survive it is by adopting this posture of intellectual humility. So that's how I roll. I don't have an interest of convincing you of anything. I don't have an interest in compelling you to think a particular way. And I think it's really good when you can share that attitude with the other folks in your classes. The only complaint or not, this isn't a complaint about me. When I've asked the college, what kinds of complaints do you get about students? In the last couple of years, the complaints that have been coming the most common from students is that they feel reluctant to ask questions or speak in class because of how their classmates are going to respond to the questions that they ask, the statements that they make. So I'm hoping that we can create this environment where we're all able to come forward and take some risks and be supportive of one another and be willing to say, like, I probably don't know, maybe I'm off here. All right. I always assume your motives are good until you've given me really, really, really good evidence to the contrary. But look, you walk into a classroom, you're already making yourself vulnerable if you're coming there to learn, because you're walking in the door and saying, well, here's something I don't know everything about. So I'm gonna give some control over to another person, i.e. me, and to a certain extent some of your classmates. And so I respect that surrender, not a surrender, that's too strong of a word. I respect that respect you're giving me in coming into a space with me and trusting me by assuming that you're worthy of being trusted as well. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions about what you do or say and assume from hearing something that rubs me the wrong way that your intentions are bad. I'm always going to assume your intentions are good, and I'm also going to assume that when you ask a question, it's a stupid question, and there are stupid questions. I can say this authoritatively because I ask them all the time. There are dumb questions. But if you really want to know the answer to a dumb question, the only thing dumber than the question is not asking the dumb question. So please never be afraid of asking a question. It's a question, right? And it's how I make my living, right? So ask questions. You're not going to offend me and hopefully nobody else by asking questions, even if they seem dumb. All right. So let's really get to it here. I believe very, very strongly that students are anti-fragile. This is a really core belief of mine, and this is might make you bristle, but here's what this means. If you think about it like a wine glass, it's fragile, right? There's no plasticity in it. If you drop it on the floor, it's likely to shatter and never be of use again. It will be destroyed. Now, there are other things that are not fragile, like plastic cups, or like this Nalgene bottle that I have here, right? This thing is not fragile. I could throw this against a wall and it probably wouldn't even break. But there are other things that are anti-fragile. And what that term means is this: they become stronger by being stressed and challenged. So your immune system is a good example of something that's anti-fragile. If you don't expose yourself to any dirt and germs, you never get sick, you're going to have a lousy immune system, because your immune system gets stronger when it's challenged, when it's stressed. Now, that doesn't mean that your immune system can't be challenged and stressed too much. It can be. You can have an illness that kills you, right? And then it's all over. But you need to have a manageable amount of stress and challenge in order to develop a healthy immune system. It's the same thing with muscles, right? The way your muscles get stronger is by going to the gym and lifting weights or running on a track or whatever. Same thing with your bones. You better subject your bones to some pounding and force and pressure and stress. Otherwise, you're going to have really weak bones, okay? Now, when I say that students are anti-fragile, I mean intellectually. I mean emotionally. I think it's really important that you think of yourself as resilient, that you can face a challenge and you can use all the resources that you have at your disposal to tackle that challenge, and you can come out on the other side of that challenge stronger intellectually. Okay, so that means you're going to come into this course, and at some points you're just going to be holding your head and you're going to want to say to yourself, I can't do this, I can't do this. And I don't believe that. I know you can do this. I know that. And if I know it, you should know it. So I want you to embrace those challenges. When somebody says something, because I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions this semester about, I'm going to ask you at some point, does God exist? And hopefully we have a really rip-roaring argument about that, like everybody else has been doing for thousands of years. And I think that's a great question to talk about responses to. And if it feels challenging and threatening, you're going to come out on the other end of that even stronger for having endured that stress and challenge. Okay. Now, I'll add to this something that I feel compelled to add the last couple of years. If you have somebody who approaches your education with what's termed a trauma-based approach, you should run from that person as fast as you can, because they are not going to do you any good. Somebody that works from the assumption that you are a victim, even if you don't realize it, and that they need to treat you as such, is going to damage you psychologically. There's mountains of evidence to support this claim. And there are mountains of evidence, it's almost incontrovertible at this point, that approaching education with an anti-fragile mindset is enormously beneficial to you emotionally and intellectually. So that's how I roll. I'm not going to shy away from challenges you put to me, because they'll make me stronger. And I'm going to ask that you try to grapple with the challenges that I put to you. They'll be manageable and you are safe in our room. The worst that happens is that you're wrong. Right? That's the worst that happens. You say something and you realize, oh, I guess I was wrong. Or, oh, I think I need to change my mind. Big whoop. Those moments are great in life. All right. Something else that's really important about me, I believe you have agency. What that means is I believe you have control over your life. That doesn't mean that I believe that your circumstances don't exert a tremendous amount of influence over your life. I know that you didn't get to pick your parents. You didn't get to pick where you were born or the features of your biology. You didn't get to pick your DNA. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are under the control of your circumstances totally. In fact, I think I could prove to you logically that it's impossible, it's impossible to hold the belief and be logically coherent that you are what philosophers would call a physicalist, that you are totally a physical phenomenon that is controlled by the circumstances, the biological, psychological circumstances of your life, and you don't actually get to make choices. It just feels like you do. I don't think that that is a logically coherent position. If you want to talk about that at some point, we can. It's complicated to lay out, but it's really interesting. So I roll with the assumption that you are responsible for your actions, even if you're not responsible for all the circumstances of your life. In other words, I don't accept the argument that there is an external locus of control over you, to use the fancy term. I assume that you have some amount of ability to make decisions freely, even though there are very powerful influences working in your life. If that weren't the case, then you'd have to, well, anyway. So I roll that way. You're responsible, I'm responsible. And then finally, I make mistakes. I probably have made some in these videos, but you make mistakes too. Ha! So we're even. And I'm saying that because all this said, I really want you to concentrate on being thoughtful this semester. Don't be a jerk. Not that you'd be a jerk. I would know you wouldn't be a jerk. But we're working in this online environment. And I know that you know that texting and online and all this bullshit social media is such a weird world that we live in. And things can slip off the rails really quickly. Okay? So two things. One is, if you're going to throw something out there that you think might cause somebody else to feel upset or offended, just frame it as something like, well, maybe I'm off on this, or I could be wrong about this, but, and then say what you want to say. If you open up by acknowledging that you're not dead set in this way and wanting to hammer us over the head with something or belittle us or make us feel less than, we'll hear you out. And then we're going to give you the same consideration. Say, well, that's really interesting. Now, I might be wrong about the way I'm responding to this, but, okay? Now, if somebody does say something like in the discussion board or somewhere that just really causes your hackles to go up, what is a hackle anyway? Well, if it really causes you to bristle, good advice for life. Wait to respond to that offensive whatever until the next day. That'll save you a lot of headache in life. Trust me, you can benefit from my experience. Don't fire off a speedy response. But the second thing to do is, if you really are feeling kind of taken aback or put off, reach out to the person privately or reach out to the person through me just to check in, see like, hey, I don't know what your intentions are, but this is how I experienced what you said. Does that line up with you intended? And do it privately. Don't pull a Twitter on somebody. I mean, not that you do that, but like, don't post something to our class discussion board that could make somebody feel like they're being backed into a corner. It's a lost opportunity to build bridges with people who are different from we are. So let's just assume everyone's intentions are good, and when we start to wonder otherwise, we're not going to call that person out into some public forum where we can flog them, or we're going to check in with them personally. Okay, so if it seems like I'm the kind of dude that's going to drive you nuts and trigger you constantly all semester, I really hope you reach out to me so that we can figure out a way to minimize um, my impact, my negative impact on your ability to learn, because I want you to finish this course successfully and I want you to have a good time while doing it.